Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing effective performance evaluation for software engineers. Right. Engineers work in an organization and each organization do have their set objectives and goals that they want to achieve in a particular period. This is a series. In the first part, we talk about how important is the contribution of individual parts and members of an organization to helping the business to achieve the objective. Take, for example, the business wants to get 1 million new customers in the first half of the year. The product team will analyze and come up with project breakdown. The engineering team will work on the project breakdown to refine and then to implement and actually do the actual coding and release the feature to the customers, right? That will eventually lead to 1 million new customers signing up. We also discuss about if one or two engineer or one or two teams decide to drop the ball, it's definitely going to impact the business. The business will not be able to achieve that objective, right? All of this we've discussed in the previous video. One thing we also mentioned is that we are going to be looking at how to evaluate the performance of a software engineer based on 4 pillars: technical contribution, team contribution, communication, personal growth and development. In the previous video, we've spoken about technical contributions. I encourage you to go and watch that again. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about team contribution. So how to evaluate the performance of a software engineer based on their team contribution. The software engineering department is usually organized into teams, right? Each team is going to have engineers, different numbers depending on the company policy. And each team will also have their own backlog, their own work that has been set out for them based on the business objectives for the particular year. Why is it important that we evaluate the performance of a software engineer based on their team contribution? Imagine you have a team of 10 engineers, right? If all the 10 engineers are contributing optimally, then you have an 100% output, right? But if just 2 of the engineers are not contributing optimally, then you have 80% output. So now that's 20% loss in performance. And that 20% loss in performance can translate to the business not being able to achieve our objectives, right? The business wants to bring in 1 million customers, right? The business will not be able to bring in 1 million new customers. Because the business is not able to achieve that, the business will not make enough profit. Because there is no enough profit, the business will not satisfy investors, shareholders, and even sometimes the business will not be able to pay bonuses and may even struggle with salary. So it's very important that when we are evaluating the performance of a software engineer, in as much as we are looking at the technical contribution, we also need to look at how does each engineer fit into a team. Because again, remember, the essence of a team is that the group output is supposed to be greater than the sum of individual outputs. What are the metrics that you can look at as a manager to evaluate the team contribution of each and every team member? So I've listed 5 of them here. Number 1, we can look at how many tasks was completed in a sprint, right? And when we are looking at that, we are looking at what's the turnaround time and what's the quality, right? Number 2, you can look at what's the complexity of the task that they are working on, right? Number 3, you can look at whenever this particular engineer is on production support, right? How many tickets did they close and at what quality, right? Number 4, you can look at their contribution to the team's knowledge. Did they create runbook? Did they create user guides? Did they document their knowledge or share it? And then lastly, we can also look at if the engineers proactively assist other team members, right? Do they respond to monitoring alerts that is involving the team? They respond to incidents involving applications that is under the purview of the team, and so on and so forth. Right. We are going to go into details of each of these metrics now. The first one we want to look at is how many tasks did an engineer completed in a sprint, right? Why is this important? It's important because if you look at the flow of tasks, we have the business goals, we have the product team that have, break down each goal into projects required to be executed so that we can achieve that goal. And then each of these projects gets assigned to the team and each team refine this product requirements, and they come up with tasks that needs to be done by each engineer. And these tasks are grouped together to be done in a sprint, right? So if we complete all the tasks in the sprint, there won't be spillovers. But if we do not complete all the tasks in a sprint, that means there will be spillovers. And if there are spillovers in sprint one, definitely there will be spillovers in sprint two. And if care is not taken, it can go on and so forth. So if there are spillovers all across, that means we are going to miss timelines or deadlines. If we miss timelines or deadlines, that means the customer will not get the product or the feature that the company or the business has promised as at when due. And when that happens, the revenue from the customer is lost, right? So that's why it's very important that when we are looking at the performance of a software engineer, we evaluate how many tasks or tickets did they complete, because this helps the team to achieve its sprint objective. We're not just looking at the quantity here, we're also looking at quality, of the completion. How many tasks they complete at what quality? For example, if you have an engineer that is spending 3 days or 4 days on a 2-point or a 1-point task, you have a challenge in there. We don't want that kind of a person in our team. So that's why we need to evaluate this particular metric as it pertains to the performance of a software engineer. Another example is that we don't also want an engineer that is doing 1 or 2 tasks in a sprint, whereas other engineers with the same role at the same level, at the same cadre, are doing 10. So we need to be able to make that distinction and evaluate this so that we can quickly work on it or take the appropriate action. And of course, it also helps us to identify high performance, right? We are able to see someone that is always going above and beyond, completing all their tasks, meeting their sprint objectives consistently as a manager, to help you to identify the high performers, and then you can reward such people, right? Number two that we want to look at is, what is the complexity of the task that this engineer is always working on. Interestingly, in my experience, I've seen a situation whereby at the end of the sprint, I'm reviewing the task done by each engineer, and I realize a pattern that this particular engineer will always be picking 1-point or 2-point tickets or task, right? Anything that is 3-point, 4-point, 5-point, they will leave it to the other guys. So you don't want to encourage such behavior. You want to discourage it. And the only way you are going to know is if you look at this metric when you are running their performance evaluation, right? When you are looking at the tasks that an engineer has done in a sprint, you want to look at what's the complexity. Do they have an healthy mix, or they are the one that is always running from the complex task and always picking up the easy ones? They are just hiding in between. You don't want that kind of person on your team, and you don't want to encourage that kind of trait. So that's why you need to evaluate the performance of an engineer based on these metrics. Another thing you can do is you can look at is when an engineer is on a production support, right? Again, production support is a team effort, right? This is something that relates to the team. So when an engineer is on production support, how many tickets did they close, right? So there are some production support for a sprint, or for 1 week, or for 2 weeks, or for 3 weeks, right? During this period, how many tickets did they close? And then how many of those tickets were reopened because they were not done properly? How many of those tickets were absolutely fixed? So these are the things you want to look at when an engineer is on production support. For example, you also want to look at how did they respond to production incidents, right? So are they the one that you have to go and be looking for them when they're on production support to be able to respond to incidents, or they are the people that is always available, they're always helpful, providing solutions, right? Because why this is important is because if you have an engineer that is closing all the tickets when they're on production support duty, right? They are meeting up with their objectives. What that means is that the team will be meeting up with its SLA commitment to the organization. And conversely, the organization will be meeting up with the SLA to the customer. So you see how this sort of feedback into each other. So that's why it's important that we need to look at this metric, right? Another one that we look at is how an engineer is sharing their knowledge, right? So because you see, for an engineer that is contributing to the team, right? That is proactively thinking about the team and contributing, at some point they will have more knowledge. They will want to solve some challenges. They want to make life easier for other team members, right? Some of the metrics that you can hints that you can look at is, did they create any run book? Did they create any user guide to document their knowledge, so that the challenge that the team is facing, we can have a documented way of solving it. So it becomes common knowledge. The team is able to achieve it. So it's not, we are not creating a key man challenge for the team, right? So these are the things that you want to look at. Lastly, you want to evaluate how proactively they are when it comes to assisting other team members, responding to monitoring alerts, incidents involving the team. Let's say somebody is, from some other team is reaching out to the team and say, hey, team X, please, how do I solve this particular challenge? Or team Y, can someone explain to me what's the APIs, to achieve this particular goal? So if you have an engineer that is always responding to that, that engineer is contributing to the team. Because at the end of the day, the person asking the question is going to go back and say, this team is very responsive, right? And if you look under the hood, you want more people to be doing that. You want more of your engineers, more team members to be doing that particular trait. So as we evaluate this, it then feed back into their performance rating. And of course, someone that is rated as higher performer, then becomes an epitome of what we want to see in every other person. And the other team members that are not performing high, then we can work on them, and be able to identify that these are the particular areas of improvement that needs to be done, right? So again, these are the metrics that you can look at when you are evaluating an engineer's performance when it comes to team contributions. Like I mentioned in the first video, we need to find source of truth so that whatever rating we come up with after looking at the metrics does not become an opinion. It becomes more concrete, much more and substantial, right? So you can look at Slack team chat. You can look at your ClickUp Jira to be able to see historical tasks that has been completed. You can look at your, document repository like Drive, Notion, so that you're able to see all the user guide or all the, run books that this particular engineer has created. You can look at the incident response log so that you're able to see how proactive they are in responding to incidents. All of this is going to form a basis of whatever rating you're able to arrive at for this particular engineer when you are doing their evaluation. All right. So thank you for staying with me so far. We still have 2 more to go. We have communication, we have personal growth and development. So stay tuned. Thanks again. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm just building this from scratch. Subscribe, like this video, share it with your within your network. Thanks for the support. See you next one. Cheers.